Um, and if you were going out, and there's a lot of people do this, and they're looking to get in the horse business, and they're going to select the mare. And you know, I know when I first started, I was out looking for some mares, and I come down here and talk to you about them and what have you. And the same way you've selected some mares through the years. Are you looking more at the conformation of the mare? You're looking more at the pedigree? You're looking at both, or what's going through your mind? And I know I've been with you and looked at some mares, and I know you already knew the pedigree when we looked at the mare. And what's going through your mind on weighting all this together?
Well, the first thing, if I'm going to buy a mare, I want the mare to be as nearly as possible in this image that I have of what my brood mare wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing that you want to do in this is to in my case, I can do that. I can look back. When I see a mare, I can look back in that mare's pedigree and see where the characteristics come from, both good and bad. So I have a little advantage that way and over people that haven't been breeding a long time. And if that mare has characteristics that I can't find in that pedigree back there, I'm going to be a little suspicious of her, because she might be what you call a sport,
mm-hmm.
which is a horse that deviates from what he ought to be according to the genetics behind it. So I would not be interested as much in that, putting that mare in, because that mare would not reproduce herself a lot of times.
So,
and the same way with a stallion.
What you're saying is, although the mare, if you looked at her, she was maybe what you was looking at as far as her appearance,
yeah.
But her pedigree is what turned you off.
Well, the pedigree, I can't find where that came from.
Yeah.
So if that's an anomaly there, you can't depend on that.
Yeah.
I want that mare to have the next 2 or 3 generations behind her coming up and making the kind of a mare she is, not just one that's completely different from her ancestors, because the chances are good that mare can't reproduce herself. And the same way with a stallion.
I want to talk about the stallion in a minute, but since we're on the mare, and you know, if you look back through some of the pedigrees that you have in your horses, and look at the strength and the tail line of the mares back through Asleta, and look at some different stallions that have been bred to them, the tail line of the mare that you're going to use to produce the new offspring becomes super important in developing that offspring. I can recognize that in a lot of the mare breedings, and I'm not so sure if people recognize the need for the strength in the tail line of the mare.
Well, you have to get as much strength or genetical input in there as you can, because that's the thing that works you towards being able to produce horses predictably to match that. You don't have to breed 10 horses to be able to select 1 or 2 out of that. That's what you want. You want to breed so that you've got enough of your concentration of genetic behind it that it's going to be well in your favor, that you're going to get 7 out of 10 instead of 3 out of 10.
You know, we're talking about this here, and it makes me think of a mare I got at home in a pedigree, and I remember when I first bred her, when I bought her and bred her, I brought her to a horse that did have some other blood in it than some Crabbit background, and that was Rosalie. And she's got a little bit of probably about 1/8 Polish. Now, if I were to develop that mare on down the road, and look at a good strong mare line from that mare. I'm really not so sure yet, bringing the other mare line in here, how that's still going to blend in there down the road just one generation down. Now, I need to go down the road another generation of breeding back into the crabbed animal before I'm really going to be pretty sure that something's not going to come back from a generation past or so.
Well,
is that true?
Yes, I'll tell you an example of that. This mare Cayenne that you were talking about a while ago, from the time that I started breeding her and selected her as a brood mare, she never produced anything but a gray filly.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that, well, I've done a pretty good job of getting away, and they were all good. And I thought I was pretty safe because, and I, for a long time, thought if you got back to the fourth and the fifth generation, that there wasn't something objectable in there, you was pretty safe that there wasn't going to something come up and surprise you. Well, and her about, I don't know how many, but probably her seventh or eighth foal, I bred her to Sancerre, and she turned up with a big bay stud coat with 4 white feet and a blazed face. And I had to go clear back into the 7th generation in England to find a horse that was marked that way.
I'll be darned.
So now I don't know if I'm safe anyplace.
Yeah. Well, you know, I made some notes, but I'm getting off my track from the standpoint of some of the conversation with you. Caused me to think about that mare. And see, I'm thinking now, I'm producing some nice animals out of her by Sancerre and Rouge, and they're nice, but I'm really not so sure yet because I'm not far enough away
That's right.
from blending in another a string of animals there that I'm not completely sure about.
Well, that outside blood could pop up and look you right in the eye in this 5th or 6th generation.
But it can also help strengthen your blood too if it don't do that, I would assume.
It all depends on what the qualities of that. Say you've got an 1/8 or a quarter in that mare.
Yeah.
And it all depends on, that could be good qualities or bad qualities. Yeah. But whatever it is, it could surprise you sometime and turning up later on.
Mm-hmm. The stallion that hold true in the mare, and I'm sure, I feel the same way, I'm sure that's true, but in the stallion's being bred to a whole lot more mares than the mare is going, and so selection in the stallion probably needs to be a little more critical even than that of the mare, even though the mare is super important to produce maybe the colt you're going to keep in years to come. Would you want to talk a little bit more about that stallion selection?
Well, the way I select my stallions is if I'm going to keep a stallion of my own, I know the mare background on it, and I know a little bit about my predictability. And when that colt comes and I look at him, I decide while he's still on his mother if he has possibilities of being a stallion.
Mm-hmm.
And if he holds that clear on up to 6 months old, then I take another look at him next year, because I don't put him on the list to sell. He's a possible horse that I'm going to keep for breeding. Well, the yearling age of a stallion is somewhat unpredictable, because they change more from what they were as a weanling through till they're 18 months old than any other time in their life. And I look at him again when he's in the fall of his yearling year and see if he still is up to standard. And I'm picking up some more solid things besides what I could see as a baby. And then I carry him on up and look at him every year up until he's a 3-year-old. And if he still then hasn't developed anything that I don't like, and it's something I think I can use, and he's fitting this image that I have, then I'll breed him to a few of my mares that I know what they're going to produce. And if he produces then, holds up in that and produces like I think he will, when I combine considering the mare and the stallion both. But I don't like to breed them to other people's mares until the second or third year.
That was one of the other things I was going to get into, is stallion evaluation.
Well,
and you're evaluating the stallion by what he's producing, by his offspring, by what you are considered to be proven mares.
That's right. And that means more to me than I would if I bred them to a mare completely different that I didn't know anything about.
Sure.
And that way I can get a better judgment on my horse. Then I like to, in that first year, if I can, and everything fits with it, to breed him to a mare that has a whole lot of things wrong with her, and see how strong he is in being able to correct that mare from what his genetics, see what his genetics will do to take a mare that has a scattered genetical pattern, and if she's all rafter hipped and falls off and badly coupled and crooked hind legs, and he can improve that by 50%. Then that's as good to me as a yardstick as it is what he does with the best one of my mares.
Sure, because you've seen the improvements of the weakness.
That's right. If he's strong, if he's going to be a valuable stallion, he's got to improve somewhat. He's not got to be a horse that has to have an outstanding mare before he can produce an outstanding foal.
That's super important.
That's right. That's very, very important.
Because when you look at some of the breedings of some of the animals that produce, they're using super select mares to a certain stallion, and you're really not getting the full picture. Is really the mare carrying this on, or is the stallion really doing it?
That's right. And the farm animal, like cattle and sheep and hogs, pay a lot more attention to that than the people with horses that are not bred for any particular purpose. And that's the way they've improved their stock.
Yep. What I wanted to do is capture some of your thoughts on the breeding that we're, and what I wanted to ask you first of all, and I made an outline this time because the times before I got thinking so much about what you were saying, I thought I needed to collect my thoughts a little bit. And you know, different people talk about breeding with different objectives in mind, and they're looking for performance, or looking for halter horses, or what they're looking for. You've been breeding horses for how many years now?
Well, actually, if you go back to my first mare, 76 years.
76 years.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you, in the Arabian part of the business, I'd like for you to just tell me what have been your breeding objectives?
Well, my objective, whether I'm breeding Arabians or saddle horses or anything else, is to build a horse that incorporates all of the things that I want to get into a horse. I don't want to just breed for performance, or I don't want to breed for excellent conformation. I want everything in there. And that's the only way to breed. You can't just specialize in one particular thing. For instance, if you're going to breed a bird dog, you're going to breed him for a good nose and scent. And it doesn't make any difference what he looks like. But with a horse has to have a good conformation. He's got to be sound. He wants to have a good way of going. And he wants to be pretty enough to satisfy the most critical observation of it. So I try to balance them all out.
Well, I'm interested in what you look for there because, you know, I can tell you I look for the same thing, but I've been try to copy a little bit after what you've been doing. And I just want to make sure that I got my thoughts and lines too, because I think that's important.
Another thing in there, what you want to always be careful in making the cross is to study your, for instance, most people have got a brood mare and they may not breed them to their own stallion, may want to breed them to somebody else. But look at your mare very critically and see the things in there that you'd like to improve, and then always breed to a stallion that has the capacity to improve those things that you want. Don't ever just breed the helter-skelter. You want to, or in a pedigree or anything else, you want to try to balance it so that every time you eliminate a little more and a little more of the objectionable things until you get on down the road for 8 or 10 generations, and then you've got a horse there that will predictably reproduce what you want.
8 or 10 generations is a long time.
That's right.
Jimmie Dean died on March 21st, 1991, a little over 3 months after this interview. We'll miss Mr. Dean. He was an inspiration to us all. Manchester Arabians of Manchester, Indiana is dedicated to preserving the heritage of the Crabbit line through the blood of Gay Rouge and Sanseret. Gay Rouge is a top 10 Canadian national champion halter stallion and sire of national champions. He is shown here in September of 1990 at the age of 25.